Hi, Stephanie from Design Plus Code. In the last part of this tutorial, we created our sweater shop. We coded all the basic UI and all the basic functionalities of our shop. So the users are able to add to their cart, and they can also view the items in their cart and remove an item as well. In this section, we will be covering the Apple Pay part. So we will be coding the Apple Pay button, and we'll also integrate the Apple Pay functionalities so the users are able to pay with the credit card for their items in their cart. First off, we will need to create our Apple Pay button that will display in our cart view. I highly encourage you to read the human interface guidelines related to the Apple Pay button. You can see that the Apple Pay button offers a lot of different button types, and we'll be using the checkout with Apple Pay. This article tells us that we must use the already coded button from Apple and not try to replicate one from scratch. There's also a few button styles that we need to follow. For example, we cannot have a dark button on a dark background or a white button with a light background like this. So let's go back to Xcode and we'll create a new SwiftUI view called Payment Button. So under the Components folder, we'll right click, create a new file. It will be a SwiftUI view and we'll call this file Payment Button. Then click on Create. At the top of this file, we will need to import a framework called PassKit. So import PassKit. And this framework will allow us to use Apple Pay in our application, and the Apple Pay button is also included in this framework. This payment button will accept one argument, and it will be an action. The action will be of parentheses and then an arrow, void. Remember that you'll need to fix the preview by passing an action argument to the preview. So we will pass curly brackets to silence this error. Before coding the body of the payment button, we'll need to create an extension on it. So extension, payment button. This extension will allow us to use the already built-in Apple Pay button because we cannot build it from scratch and just copy the design. So inside of this extension, the first thing we need to code is a struct. So we'll do struct and we'll call it representable. It will be of UI view representable type. We will need to pass an action to this representable. So var action, and it will be the same type as the action that we pass to our payment button component. Inside of this UI view representable, we need to create three functions. The first one is the make coordinator. So you can simply start typing make and you will see the autocomplete suggestions. So I will double click on it and you will see that it automatically adds the make coordinator function for me. Inside of this function, we'll call coordinator and we'll pass an action to this coordinator. You can see that we have a few errors here, but it will be fixed when we complete our code in this extension. So the second function we want to add is the make UI view function. So we'll double click on it. And inside of this function, we'll call our context.coordinator.button. The last function we need to create in this struct is the update UI view function. So let's double click on this. And inside of this function, we'll do context.coordinator.action is the action that we pass to this function. So we need to create a coordinator inside of this extension to silence all the errors that we see now. Right after our struct, let's create a class called coordinator, and it will conform to the NSObject protocol. This coordinator will have two arguments. The first one is the action, which will be the same type as the action in our representable. The second one is a button, and we'll initialize it inside of this coordinator. It will be a PK payment button type, and this will require two arguments. The first one is the payment button type, and the second one is the payment button style. If we take a look at the human interface guidelines, you can see all the payment button types in this list here. As I mentioned before, we will be using the checkout with Apple Pay button. We'll need to do dot, and you can see all the available options for you. So since we are using the checkout one, we'll simply write checkout, and the text displayed on the bottom will say checkout with Apple Pay. For the payment button style, we'll set it to automatic. Next, right below this variable button, we will initialize our coordinator with the action. Then we'll write escaping and it will be a void function. Inside of the init, we need to set the action, which will be the action that we pass to this coordinator. And then on the next line, we'll do super.init. Right below that, we will call our button and we'll add a target to it. The target will be self. The action will be selector callback. And the UI control event will be the touch up inside. You can see that we have an error that it cannot find callback. So outside of the init function, we will add object and we'll create a function called callback, and it will accept a sender, which will be of any type. And inside of this function, we will call the action. So right now you can see that all of our errors are silenced because we added all the code required to make our payment button. This code was taken from the Fruta sample app from Apple. Now that we finished coding our extension, it's time to update the body of our payment button. So instead of displaying a text saying hello world, we'll call our representable. Remember that it requires an action, so we'll pass the action that we passed to this component. And you can see that right now the button is taking the full height of the screen. Let's change that and we'll add a frame with a min width of 100 pixels and a max width of 400 pixels. Then we'll add a frame with a height of 45 pixels and also another frame with a max width of infinity. We need to add all these frames to follow the human interface guidelines. Finally, we'll simply need to use this button in our cart view. So let's go back to cart view, and right below the H tag displaying the total of the user's cart, we will call our payment button. Remember that it requires an action, so for the moment we'll simply pass curly brackets. Let's add some padding all around it because otherwise the payment button will hug the sides of the phone. Let's go to content view, resume the preview, and let's add a few items to our cart. Then let's go see our cart, and you can see our checkout with Apple Pay button here. Now let's put aside the code for a bit. We need to do some configuration in order to enable Apple Pay in our application. As I mentioned before, make sure that you're under the Apple Developer Program before continuing, because Apple Pay is only available for Apple developers under the program. If you're not under the program, head over to this link here, click on Enroll, and you will see how to enroll into the program. Now let's take a look at Apple's documentation on setting up Apple Pay in our application. And you can see that we need to follow 3 steps to enable Apple Pay in our application. The first one is to create a merchant identifier. The second one is to create a payment processing certificate. And the last one is to enable Apple Pay in Xcode. So let's dive into each step in depth and implement that for our application. Let's start by creating the merchant identifier. As specified in Apple's documentation, a merchant identifier is a unique identifier that never expires and can be used multiple times in different applications. It allows us to register ourselves as a merchant to accept payments through Apple Pay. First, we will need to head over to our developer account. So head over to developer.apple.com/account and sign in to your account. Next, click on Certificates, IDs, and Profiles on the left side. Then, click on the Identifiers tab and click on the plus sign next to the identifier title. In the list Register a New Identifier, scroll down and select Merchant IDs. Then, click on the Continue button at the top. On the next screen, you will need to fill in this form. You need to provide a merchant description and an identifier name. The description can be anything you want, so in my case, I will write Sweater Shop App Demo. And the identifier must follow the format com.domainname.appname. So I will write io.designcode.sweatershopdemo. And by default, it will add the merchant dot at the beginning of your identifier. Then click on Continue. Double check your settings and click on Register. Great! Now our merchant identifier has been created. Now we need to create a payment processing certificate. This will make all the transactions of our users within our application secure by encrypting the payment information. we'll need our merchant identifier we just registered to create this certificate. The payment processing certificate expires after 25 months, but if it expires, you can always recreate it. So still under your Apple developer account, under Certificates, Identifiers, and Profiles, click on Identifiers. Use the filter at the top right corner to filter out and select only the merchant IDs. Here you will see your list of merchant IDs and select the one that you just created. So I just created this one, so I will click on that. If you see a warning at the top, the account holder of your team must agree to the Apple Pay platform web merchant terms and conditions before continuing. Keep this page open on your browser. Then on your Mac, open Spotlight and search for Keychain Access. So we'll open this application and we'll need to follow the steps to create a certificate signing request. You will find this link in the text content or the description below. So in the menu at the top, select Keychain Access, then Certificate Assistant, request a certificate from a certificate authority. Click on that, and you will see a Certificate Assistant window open. In here, you will need to provide your user email address, then you will need to add a common name, which is any string that you want, and then click on Saved to Disk. Once you've filled in everything, click on Continue, and you will be able to save your certificate signing request on your computer. So click on Save. And if everything is good, you should see your certificate request has been created on disk. Now click on Done. Now back on the Apple developer account, you will use the certificate you just downloaded and upload it to this website. So click on Create Certificate, and it will ask you if the payments associated with this merchant ID be processed exclusively in China mainland. In my case, it will be no, so I will select no, then click on Continue. Then you will need to upload a certificate signing request. Click on Choose File and select the certificate signing request that we just downloaded from Keychain Access. Click on Open, then click on Continue. And once you're done, the certificate, which is of .cer extension, will be downloaded and saved into your Downloads folder. Remember to keep it somewhere secure. Now let's head back to our Xcode project. We will need to enable the Apple Pay capability in Xcode. So click on your project name, then under Targets, click again on your project's name, and then click on the Sign In and Capabilities tab. At the top left, click on Plus Capability to add a new capability to your project. Then search for Apple Pay and double-click on that. You will see that a new section for Apple Pay has been added to your project. Click on the refresh button next to the plus button, and you will see that the merchant identifiers that are associated with your account will be listed here. Select the one that you just created, and you should see a new item added to your Sweater Shop demo folder. This is simply an entitlements file specifying the merchant ID associated with this application. Great! Now that the configuration is done, let's go back to coding. This is the last stretch before we're done with our Sweater Shop. So let's create a new Swift file under the Sweater Shop demo, and it will be a Swift file. Let's call this Payment Handler. The code we'll add in the Payment Handler file is taken from the sample app offering Apple Pay in your app from Apple. So in this file, after importing Foundation, we also need to import PathKit, which is the module that contains Apple Pay. Then we'll need to create a type alias, and we'll call this Payment Completion Handler, which will be equals to Boolean, and it will return void. A type alias is a name alias we give in our application. In this case, instead of always writing bool will return void, we can simply write Payment Completion Handler. Then right below the type alias, we'll create a class called Payment Handler. It will conform to the NSObject protocol. Inside of this class, let's create a few variables at the top. So we'll need a payment controller, which will be of PK payment authorization controller type, and it will be optional. Next, we also need a payment summary items, which will be an array of PK payment summary item type, and we will add parentheses at the end. So that means that we're initializing an empty array of PK payment summary item type. Right below that, we'll create another variable that will be called payment status, and it will be equals to pk payment authorization status dot failure, because by default, we don't want the payment status to be a success. And finally, we'll need to add a completion handler variable, which will be of payment completion handler type, which is the type alias that we just created on line 11 here. Next, we need to specify the supported networks. In other words, the type of cards our app accepts. So we'll do static let supported networks, and it will be an array of pk payment network, and it will be equals to an array. Inside of this array, we will simply add two networks. We'll just accept Visa and MasterCard. Note that you can add other types of cards, and you can browse all the available networks in Apple's documentation on PK Payment Network. So if you scroll down, you can see all the payment networks that Apple Pay accepts. For example, Amex, Barcode, Carte Bancaire, China Union Pay, Discover, and all of that. So we will just accept the Visa and MasterCard in our application. You can also head over to the Offering Apple Pay in your app sample code from Apple, and when you scroll down to the Add Apple Pay button, you can see an example code for the supported networks, and you can also see a class function here. This function will check for the ability to make payments and also the available cards in the user's Apple Pay account. You can also display a custom payment button according to the result, because this function will return two booleans that will let you know if the user can make payments and if they can set up cards. However, in our app, we won't be using this function. Next, back in Xcode, we will create a function called shipping method calculator, and it will return an array of pk shipping method. Inside of this function, we will need to calculate the delivery time. So let's create a variable called today, and it will be a date. Then we will need to create a calendar. So let calendar will be equals to calendar.current. Right after that, we will create a variable called shipping start, and we'll call our calendar.date by adding a day, and the value is 5 to today. So this line of code means that we're adding 5 days from the date of today. And this means the first day that the user might receive the items that they ordered in our application. Then we'll do the same, but for the shipping end date. So we'll do calendar.date by adding a day. We want to add a day, and the value is 10 because we want to add 10 days to today's date. The shipping start and the shipping end variables are both optional, so we need to unwrap these optionals. We'll do if let shipping end equals to shipping end, and by default, it will autocomplete and add the closure for us, but we also want to unwrap the optional for the shipping start date. So we'll do comma, let shipping start equals to shipping start. Inside of this if statement, we will need to create two variables again. So the first one is the start components, and we'll call our calendar and call the date components function. And this will return the date components of a date using the calendar time zone. So for the components, we want to add an array, and we want the calendar, the year, the month, as well as the date from the shipping start date. Then let's simply copy this line and paste it below. And instead of start components, we'll call this variable end components. And instead of getting the date components from the shipping start, we want the date from the shipping end. Right below that, we will create our shipping delivery. So let shipping delivery will be equals to pk shipping method. And if you remember, this function will return an array of pk shipping method. So we will select the second one with the label and the amount. And for the label, we will add delivery. The amount will be free shipping. So we'll create an NS decimal number from a string, and it will be 0.00, meaning that the shipping is free. Now we'll need to add some more information to our shipping delivery. we'll call the shipping delivery variable and set its date components range. So this is the range of delivery or shipping dates for a package. So in other words, our package will be sent from 5 to 10 days starting from the order date. And this will be equals to pk date components range, and we need to provide a start and an end, and both of them should be of date components type. Luckily, we already created these components here, so we'll simply need to copy and paste that here. And we'll do the same for the end date component. Right below that, we'll add some detail to our shipping delivery and an identifier. So shipping delivery dot detail is equals to, we'll say that our sweaters are sent to your address. Then shipping delivery dot identifier will be equals to a string, and it will be delivery all in uppercase. And finally, we will return an array of shipping delivery. However, you can see that we still have the error that we're missing a return function. It's because if the optional of the shipping end and the shipping start are not unwrapped, we must also return something. So outside of the if statement, we will return an empty array if the shipping start and the shipping end date are not set on line 28 and 29, and if we ever run into an error. Now you can see that our error has gone away. Right below the shipping method calculator, we'll need to create another function. And this function will be called start payment, and it will accept a few arguments. The first one will be a product, and it will be an array of product. Then we'll also have a total, which will be an integer, and a completion handler. So we'll do at escaping payment completion handler. So the completion handler is what we would want to perform once the function has finished running. The start payment function will be a really big function. On the first line of this function, we will set the completion handler variable that we created at the top on line 17 to the completion that we passed to this function. Next, we'll need to reset our payment summary items because we want to reset the cart before adding new items to this cart. So let's iterate over the products array. So products dot for each product in this array, we will create a pk payment summary item. So you can see that it requires 3 arguments. The first one is the label. For the label, we will call our product.name. The amount must be of nth decimal number type. So to create one is the same as the one that we added in our shipping delivery. So we'll add parentheses and we'll create an nth decimal number from a string. So let's create a string, and we'll need to call our product.price, and we'll add .00. The type will be final. So let's save this pk payment summary item instance in an item variable. Then right below this item, we'll call our payment summary items array and append this item to our array, meaning that at the top, our payment summary items will contain all the products from our cart manager. Then we'll also need to create another pk payment summary item, and we'll call this variable total. So it will be equals to pk payment summary item. The label will be total. The amount will be of nth decimal number type, and we'll create it from a string. So it will be the total that we pass to this function, and the type will also be final. Then similar to what we did in the for each, we will append it to the payment summary items array. Append, and it will be the total. Once we added all the items from our cart to the payment summary items, and we also added the total, we will need to create a payment request. So let payment request will be equals to pk payment request with parentheses at the end so that we initialize an instance of pk payment request. Then we'll need to add all the information related to the user's order. So first we'll call the payment request dot payment summary items, and it will be equals to the payment summary items array from this class. So luckily we already added all of the items to our payment summary items array. Next, we'll call again payment request dot merchant identifier, which is a string, and it will be the merchant identifier that we created in the configuration step for Apple Pay. If you don't remember what it is, simply click on this file here, which is the entitlements file. And if you open the merchant IDs, you will see the value here. So you can copy this. And let's go back to our payment handler and simply paste it inside of the double quotes. Then we need to set up the merchant capabilities. And you can add a dot and you will see all the merchant capabilities. So we will select the capability 3DS, which is a security protocol used to authenticate users. Next, we will need to set the country code. So let's set it to US. And we'll also need to set the currency code. So in the US, they are using US dollars, so we'll simply specify USD. Then we'll need to set the supported networks. So this is the static variable that we created before, which is an array of PK payment network. To access this, since we added the static here, we need to call our class, which is payment handler dot supported networks. Then we need to specify the shipping type. And the shipping type is delivery, since our shop can only deliver the items. Then we'll also need to specify the shipping methods, which is the PK shipping method that we created in our shipping method calculator. So since this function returns an array of PK shipping method, we can simply call this function in here. So it will be equals to shipping method calculator with parentheses at the end. And finally, the last bit of information that we need to add to our payment request is the required shipping contact fields. And it will be an array, and we want the name as well as the postal address. So every time that the user tries to pay their card in our app, they need to provide their name as well as their postal address. Now, after creating the payment request, we need to display it on a sheet presentation. For that, we'll be using some UIKit code. So we'll need to create a PK payment authorization controller, and it requires a payment request. So luckily, we created the payment request and added all the information related to it. So we can just call our payment request variable. Now, let's save this PK payment authorization controller in the payment controller variable that we created on line 14. So it will be payment controller will be equals to this. Then a payment controller requires a delegate. So we will do payment controller, and since this is optional, we need to add a question mark. Dot delegate will be equals to self. So that means that we're setting a delegate to the payment controller. If you try to build your application now, you can see that we run into an error and it says that we cannot assign value of type payment handler to type PK payment authorization controller delegate. To fix that, we will need to create an extension on payment handler. So outside of the class, create a new line and we'll create an extension on payment handler, and it will conform to the PK payment authorization controller delegate. So we need to add this extension and it should conform to this delegate so that we can silence this error here. Inside of this, we need to create two functions. The first function we want to create in this extension is the did authorize payment. And we will select the second one with the completion handler. Inside of this function, we will need to create a variable called errors, and it will be an array of errors, and we initialize it. Then we'll also create a variable called status, and it will be equals to PK payment authorization status dot success. And since this function is did authorize payment, meaning that the payment has been authorized and it has been a success, we will set the self dot payment status, and it will be equals to the status variable that we created on line 78. Then right below that, we'll call our completion, and we will complete it with PK payment authorization status. The status will be the status that we created on line 78. And then we also have to provide the errors, which is the errors that we created on line 77. Oh, I made a typo again. So errors. So this function here will handle all the success and the errors related to the payment. Next, we also need to add the did finish function. So simply start typing did finish and select this one. Inside of this, we will need to dismiss the sheet presentation because the sheet presentation that we will call will not be dismissed by itself once the payment has been succeeded. So we'll call controller.dismiss. And inside of this closure, we'll need to do dispatch queue.main.async. If self.payment status is equals to success, then we want to call our completion handler and return the boolean true, meaning that the payment has been a success. Otherwise, we want to call our completion handler and we will return false because we ran into an error. However, you can see that we have an error because the completion handler is an optional. So we need to unwrap that optional before calling our completion handler. So if let completion handler is equals to self.completion handler, then we'll move this inside of the if statement. And we'll do the same for the else. Great. Now let's try to build our application again. I will do Command B on my keyboard. And you can see that the build has succeeded. Now we just assigned the delegate to our payment controller. However, we didn't call the code to present the Apple Pay sheet yet. So back in start payment, right below the delegate line, we will call our payment controller again and add a question mark, then dot present with a completion handler. And the boolean that is returned will be called presented. So if presented is true, we will call debug print and print the message to our console saying presented payment controller. Otherwise, we will call debug print again and we will print failed to present payment controller. Great. We're done with the payment handler. We just need to connect it to our cart manager and UI so that when the user taps on the checkout with Apple Pay button, they'll see the Apple Pay sheet presentation. So let's first take care of the cart manager. Let's go to our cart manager file. And at the top, we'll need to add two variables. First, we'll need to initialize our payment handler. So payment handler will be equals to payment handler with parentheses at the end. Then we'll add a publish variable, which will be private set var payment success, and it will be equals to false. And this payment success variable will let us know if the payment was a success or not. Then after the remove from cart function, we will create another one called pay. Inside of this, we will call our payment handler dot start payment function. Remember that it requires a products array, a total, and a completion handler. So for the completion handler, you just need to double click on it and it will automatically add a closure for you. For the products, we will pass the products array variable that we have in this class, and the total, you might have guessed it, is also the total variable that we have in this class. Now in the completion handler, we will get a success, which will be a Boolean variable. So we'll set self.payment success will be equals to the success Boolean value that we get in return. Then we'll also need to reset the products array to an empty cart, and the total will be $0. Now let's go to our cart view, and on the payment button, instead of adding curly brackets, we will replace it by our cart manager pay function. Now we'll also wrap our if-else statement in another if-else statement. At the top, right after your scroll view, we will add if cart manager payment success. We will display a message thanking the user for their purchase. Otherwise, we will display the current if-else statement checking for the number of products in the user's cart. So in the if statement for the payment success, let's add a text saying, thanks for your purchase. You'll get cozy in our comfy sweaters soon. Then we'll tell them that they'll also receive an email confirmation shortly. We'll add some padding all around this text so that it doesn't hug the sides of our phone. So if you test out your code in the simulator now, you will see that if you quit the cart view and then you come back, you will still see the payment success. We want to reset the payment success to false when the user quits the cart view. So on the scroll view, we will add the on disappear modifier, meaning that when the cart view disappears, we will reset the payment success. So we will only reset the payment success if it is true. So if cart manager.payment success, we will call our cart manager.payment success and set it to false. However, you can see we have an error because we set the payment success setter as private. So let's simply remove this and go back to cart view and try to build our application. And you can see that the build has succeeded. Great, we've finished coding our application. So it's time to test the complete flow of our application. Build it in the simulator, click on the play button at the top here, and it will build your application in a separate simulator. The simulator is really good because it comes with built-in test cards and a few addresses that you can add to Apple Pay, and you can test the whole Apple Pay flow. So once your application has been built, add a few items to your cart. So I will add a few sweaters and click on the cart icon at the top corner so that you're redirected to your cart view. And you can see all the items that you added in your cart, and you can also remove an item. So if I remove the item, you will see that the list of items in my cart has been updated as well as the total price. Then we can click on Checkout with Apple Pay, and you will see a sheet presentation like this from Apple Pay. You can select a simulated card. You can select either Visa or MasterCard because these are the only two supported networks that we added to our application. Then you can also select a delivery address. So you can go to, for example, home, and you can search for John Appleseed. So these are the default contacts that are added in the simulator for you. And you can click on done and select anyone that you want, then click on done again. Then you will also see the delivery time. So since today is January 5th, we calculated 5 to 10 days from today's date. So our order items will arrive between January 10th and January 15th. Then we have our total. And if you click on that, you can see all the items in our cart. And you can pay with passcode. Then you will hear the ding from Apple Pay. Is the same sound as when you purchase an app from the Apple Store on your iPhone. And then you will see a success message confirming that you completed your purchase and that you will receive an email confirmation shortly. Now, when you go back to content view, you will see that our cart is now empty. And if we click on that again, the cart has been emptied as well. So congratulations, you just built a shop application in SwiftUI from scratch. Although we needed to incorporate a bit of UIKit to implement Apple Pay, the application was mostly built in Swift. There's a lot more that we could have covered in this tutorial, but I will leave it to you to make your own application even better. So I have a few suggestions for you. You can, for example, improve the error handling behavior because right now we're not really showing any error to the user, and we only handle the payment success or failure, which is a Boolean value. You can also concatenate the same products in the same row because if I add twice the same item, you will see that we have two different rows for the two items. And you will also see an error printed in the console that in the array that we're iterating through, we have two items with the same ID, which might lead to unexpected behaviors. Another suggestion will be to add a detail view for each sweater. So when the user taps on a sweater card, it will lead them to the detail view and they will be able to see more information about each sweater in your shop. You can also show the Apple Pay button only if it's available or if the user already set up a card in Apple Pay on their device using the Apple Pay status function that I showed earlier and that is available in the text content of this section. Another feature that you can work on is to accept coupons. So you can head over to the Offering Apple Pay in your app documentation. And when you scroll down to the bottom, you have a section response to coupon code entry. So this is the code that you can copy and adapt for your own application to accept discounts in your shop. So I hope that you enjoyed coding along with me and building this sweater shop with Apple Pay from scratch with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy coding along with me, and see you in the next tutorial.